Peace is a liar. It tricks you into thinking the war inside is over. I thought peace finally had a place in my life. Quiet mornings, clean code, and no more ghosts from the past. But the day my mother showed up on my doorstep with my half-brother, flashing fake smiles and greedy eyes, I realized peace was just another illusion. I had no idea that visit would drag my father out of hiding and lead to the kind of justice money can't buy. Before we dive into this story, make sure to hit the subscribe button. You know that kind of peace that almost feels suspicious? Like life's gone so still you start waiting for the other shoe to drop? That was me. Hello, my name is Emma Walsh at 35. I'd finally built something solid in Raleigh. A small cybersecurity firm that actually paid the bills, a quiet house with creaky floors, and mornings that started with coffee instead of chaos. I'd clawed my way up from food stamps and overdue notices, and for the first time in my life, nobody could take that from me, or so I thought. My mom, Lydia, still lived 2 hours away in Durham. We didn't talk much, not because of hate, just exhaustion. She'd worked herself half to death raising me after Dad bailed when I was 11. He was one of those smooth-talking dreamers who could charm anyone, but never managed to stick around for long. She used to say, "Your father's promises had wings but no feet." So, I grew up learning not to depend on anyone. Scholarships, side jobs, coding at night while everyone else was out drinking cheap beer. It wasn't glamorous, but it got me here. My company, Walsh Cyber Defense, had just landed a new client, a law firm needing a digital audit. I was finally in control, safe inside my routine, until the day my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Mom. I almost let it ring out, but something in my chest told me to answer. "Hey, Ma," I said, half smiling into the receiver. "Everything okay?" Her voice was too chipper. "Oh, honey, we're just in the area. Thought we'd swing by. I've got someone I want you to meet. We." That one word had my gut tightening. Who's we? But she'd already hung up. Within an hour, I was pacing my living room, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd joined a church group, or, God forbid, met someone new on Facebook Marketplace. Then I heard it. That knock, 3 firm raps that didn't sound like my mom's gentle tap. I opened the door and froze. There he was. Greg Walsh, my father. Gray hair slicked back, wearing a smug grin that could still melt butter. And beside him, a woman half his age with too much perfume and a diamond flashing like a warning light. Behind them, a teenage boy scrolling on his phone, not even looking up. "Hey, Emmy," my father said, like he hadn't disappeared 24 years ago. "Long time, huh?" For a second, I just stood there, heart thudding like I'd seen a ghost. My mom was smiling nervously, wringing her hands. "Surprise," she said, like this was some kind of Hallmark reunion. I wanted to slam the door, but manners are a curse you learn too young. So I stepped aside. "Come in," I said flatly. They walked in like they owned the place. The boy, Evan, I later learned, dropped onto my couch, shoes and all. The woman, Tessa, started complimenting my minimalist style, which was her polite way of saying I didn't have enough furniture to look rich. And Dad? He just looked around, nodding, eyes scanning every corner like he was taking inventory. I made coffee mostly to keep my hands busy. Mom kept trying to fill the silence with small talk. "Emma's doing so well, Greg. She runs her own company." Greg smiled. That salesman's smile I used to fall for when I was a kid. "That's my girl," he said. I always knew she'd make it big. I wanted to laugh. "Make it big?" He didn't even stick around long enough to see me get braces. I sat across from them, listening to his half-hearted stories about tough times and family meaning more than money. But under all that syrupy talk, I felt something sharp, like he was steering toward something. Then Tessa chimed in, her voice soft but practiced. "Evan's been working on this tech startup. Just needs a little boost to get it off the ground. You two could probably talk shop." I looked at the kid. He shrugged without looking up. "Yeah, it's gonna be huge. We just need 50 grand to launch." The air left the room. Mom glanced at me, almost pleading. Greg leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping low. "You know, sweetheart, it's family. We help each other out." Something in me went cold. I smiled politely, the kind of smile that hides a scream. "I'll think about it." The rest of the visit blurred. Fake laughter, awkward hugs, empty promises to catch up soon. When the door finally closed behind them, I stood there staring at the handle like it might move again. My coffee had gone cold. The peace I'd built My quiet, orderly life felt like it had cracked right down the middle. I didn't know it yet, but that knock wasn't the start of a reunion. It was the sound of my past coming back to steal from me one last time. The thing about family drama is, it doesn't blow up all at once. It seeps in slow like a leak behind drywall. By the time you notice the damage, the rot's already there. After that reunion, I told myself it was a one-time thing. They'd take the hint and vanish back to whatever trailer park of guilt they crawled out of. But Greg Walsh was never one to let go of an angle once he found it. It started small. Texts from Mom. "Honey, your father's really trying. Maybe you could hear him out." Then came calls from unknown numbers. Tessa's voice, syrupy sweet. "Hey, Emma, just checking in about that little investment idea." I stopped answering. But ignoring them only made them push harder. One morning, I stepped out to grab my mail and froze. Parked out front was a silver sedan I didn't recognize. Inside sat Greg, leaning back like he owned the neighborhood. He waved, I didn't wave back. He climbed out, that same crooked smile on his face. "Didn't want to bother you at work," he said. "Just thought maybe we could talk man to man. Well, you know what I mean." "Make it quick," I said. He launched into his pitch. Evan's business had tanked, he said, but it wasn't the boy's fault. Bad economy, you know how it is. He needed help. 50,000, maybe even 40. "You could write it off as a family loan," he said, like I hadn't worked 16-hour days for every dime I'd saved. I just stared at him, trying to figure out if he actually believed his own crap. "You know what's funny?" I said. "When I was 11 and you walked out, Mom was working nights at the diner just to keep the lights on. I don't remember you showing up then." His jaw tightened. "I had my reasons." "Yeah," I said, stepping closer. "They just all happened to have legs and fake nails." That wiped the smirk off his face. He muttered something about me being ungrateful, about how blood's thicker than water. I laughed, loud and sharp enough to make him flinch. "Not when the blood's toxic." He stormed off after that, but I could tell it wasn't over. Guys like Greg don't leave until they've taken everything they can. A few days later, I got a call from my bank. "Ms. Walsh, we're seeing some unusual loan applications under your business name." My stomach dropped. I hadn't filed any. I spent the next 2 hours combing through emails, portal logins, security logs, and there it was. Digital fingerprints. IP traces from a residential network 2 counties away. Same one Greg had texted me from. My hands went numb. He hadn't just crossed a line. He'd torched it. When I confronted Mom, she went silent for a long time. Then softly she said, "He told me it was just paperwork." "Said you'd agreed." "Mom," I said, voice trembling. "He forged my name. He stole from me." She started crying. "He said he just needed a little help for Evan." There it was again. That boy. The golden child he'd raised while I'd been the forgotten one. I pictured him smirking behind his fancy gaming laptop while my credit tanked. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing code on my monitor. My brain switched from hurt to hardware mode. I wasn't the scared kid anymore. I was a cybersecurity specialist, and he'd just made a digital enemy. I pulled every log, every trace, every timestamp. Built a timeline. Screenshot after screenshot. My anger sharpened into something surgical. He wanted to play dirty? I'd play smarter. A week later, I had enough to hang him in any courtroom. But I didn't go to the police yet. I wanted him to see what it felt like. To realize the daughter he'd once dismissed as too emotional now held the keys to his ruin. When I finally called him, he sounded too confident. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said. "Changed your mind about helping?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm helping, just not in the way you think." Click. For the first time since he'd shown up at my door, I slept through the night. Not because the storm had passed, but because I'd decided to stop hiding from it. He thought he'd taught me to survive by leaving. Turns out he taught me how to fight. When you work in cybersecurity, you see scams every day: phishing, identity theft, deepfakes, but nothing prepares you for when the scammer has your bloodline. I spent the next morning pacing my home office, fingers twitching over the keyboard. My heart was a jackhammer. I'd caught crooks in Europe, shut down fraud rings overseas, but this was personal. This was my father. I logged into my company's back end, pulling digital audit trails like a detective dusting for prints. The more I looked, the sicker I felt. He hadn't just forged my signature, he'd built a whole paper trail to look like I'd co-signed on those loans. He'd even downloaded copies of my digital ID badge, my old bank stamp, and faked entire approval emails using my work domain. That takes planning. That takes guts. Or maybe just stupidity mixed with desperation. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "Well, Dad," I muttered, "you really went all in this time." My phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. "Unknown. Need to talk. It's not what you think." "Dad?" "Yeah, right." I could almost hear his drawl, the practiced tone that once made me believe he cared. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a secure virtual sandbox, dropped every piece of evidence inside, and started connecting dots. IP logs pointed to his new address. Timestamps matched his last family visit. Metadata from a fake invoice even showed edits from a laptop model he'd bragged about in the kitchen. He'd practically left breadcrumbs with neon lights. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. That night, I drove aimlessly around Raleigh, the city lights smearing like wet paint through my windshield. My mom's voice echoed in my head. "He's just lost." "Emma, you've always been so strong." "Yeah. Strong. That's what people say when they don't know what else to call the girl who keeps patching holes others keep making." By the time I got home, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't calling him. I wasn't yelling. I was documenting, quietly, thoroughly, like a pro. The next day, I looped in Alan Reeves, my lawyer, the same one who'd helped me set up my firm. He's an old-school guy, gray hair, dry humor, the kind who calls everyone kiddo no matter how old they are. He glanced through the folder I handed him and whistled low. "Emma, this is airtight. You could fry him with this?" "Not yet," I said. "I want him to know what he messed with first." Alan raised a brow. "You sure you don't want me to file now?" I shook my head. Let him sweat. He's been living rent-free in my head for too long. For a few days, I waited. Each morning, I checked my inbox, half expecting another forged document or some new mess. Instead, I got silence. The kind of silence that hums before a storm. Then it came. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. "Emma, please don't do this." He says it was a mistake. He says he thought it'd be easy to fix. I sat on the floor listening to it 3 times. Same excuse, different decade. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, neat, and sat by the window. The moonlight hit the framed certificate on my wall, founder, Walsh Cyber Defense. That name used to make me proud. Now it made me ache. The betrayal wasn't just digital, it was generational. My father had walked out on me once as a man, and now again as a thief. But this time he'd left fingerprints. And me? I wasn't 11 anymore. I wasn't crying into cheap cereal waiting for him to come home. I had tools, law, and proof on my side. I sent Alan one final message. Me. Move forward. No warnings this time. He replied with a single word. Done. As I shut my laptop, a strange calm washed over me. The kind that comes after you've stopped hoping the other person will ever do right. I looked out at the quiet street, lights flickering from the neighbor's porch. Somewhere out there, Greg Walsh still thought he was smarter than me. I almost smiled. Game on, Dad. You never forget the smell of a courthouse. Paper, nerves, and too much old coffee. It's the kind of place where people pretend justice feels good, but really, it just feels heavy. Alan and I sat outside the courtroom that morning, the manila folder between us like a loaded weapon. Inside it wasn't bullets. It was data, screenshots, logs, digital DNA. Proof that my father, Greg Walsh, had tried to turn my life into his personal ATM. He arrived late, of course. Same old swagger, same too loud laugh, like he was walking into a family barbecue instead of a fraud hearing. Tessa trailed behind him, face powdered, voice sugary sweet when she spotted me. Emma, honey, you look tired, all this? Stress can't be good for you. I smiled just enough to show teeth. Funny, I sleep just fine. Then I saw Mom. She looked smaller than I remembered. Like guilt had hollowed her out. She didn't meet my eyes. The bailiff called our case, and everything slowed down. I could hear the scratch of pens, the squeak of a chair, the air conditioner humming above. Greg sauntered to the stand, hand on the Bible like it meant something. The prosecutor started easy. Questions about his consulting business, his family ties. Greg answered with the same fake charm he'd used my whole childhood. I could almost see the little boy grin he used to flash when he'd sneak cookies before dinner. Then they showed the documents. My name, my company, my forged signature. He blinked. That's not mine, he said, too quick. The prosecutor nodded to me. Ms. Walsh, would you care to explain this? I stood, walked to the projector, and clicked the remote. My digital presentation lit up the courtroom wall. Time-stamped logs, matching IP addresses, metadata with his device ID, even his online footprint when he'd downloaded the forged templates. Greg's smile evaporated. You see this number? I said, pointing to a timestamp. That's the router address for your house. You emailed yourself this document 20 minutes later. He stammered something about hackers, about someone framing him. I let him talk. I'd spent my whole life being interrupted by that man. This time, I wanted the silence that followed. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Walsh, is there any doubt in your professional opinion about the origin of these files? None, Your Honor. My voice didn't even shake. The evidence is clear. Greg turned toward me, face pale. Emma, sweetheart, please. I was just trying to help Evan. By stealing from your daughter? The judge cut in. Tessa started crying. Evan, sitting behind her, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing left to say. The judge's gavel cracked through the air. Mr. Walsh, you are hereby found guilty of identity theft, forgery, and attempted fraud. Sentencing will follow. Alan placed a steady hand on my arm. You okay, kiddo? I nodded, but the truth is, I wasn't sure what I felt. Relief didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing in the wreckage of a house you'd built just to watch it burn. When we stepped outside, reporters were waiting. Small-town scandal always draws a crowd. Someone shouted, Ms. Walsh, any statement? I looked straight at the cameras. Yeah, trust is earned, and sometimes justice has to log in first. They didn't get the joke, but Alan snorted beside me. Later that evening, Mom showed up at my door. She didn't say anything for a long while, just stood there holding a folded piece of paper. Greg's sentencing notice. Her eyes were swollen. I didn't know, she whispered. He told me he just needed a signature. I wanted to believe him. Like old times. I sighed, stepping aside so she could come in. Mom, you don't have to explain. You just have to stop defending him. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her face. I lost him once. Guess I lost him again? No, I said gently. You finally saw him for who he really was. We sat there a long time. The silence between us not angry anymore, just sad and somehow freeing. When she left, I went to my office and looked at the same folder that had started it all. Every file, every log, every proof. For weeks it had felt like a weapon. Tonight it looked like closure. I powered down the computer, turned off the lights, and whispered into the dark. Game over. Dad. And for the first time in years, that house, my house, finally felt like it belonged to me. After the verdict, the house felt different. Quieter, lighter somehow, like someone had finally opened a window after years of stale air. For days, I didn't turn on my computer. No work emails, no client pings, no notifications. I just sat in silence, drinking coffee from my chipped mug, the one thing I'd kept from my first apartment. It was strange having no one to fight. No lies to disprove, no schemes to unwind. The war was over, but peace didn't arrive with fireworks. It came like a slow sunrise, soft and stubborn. Mom called sometimes. She'd started therapy too. Our talks were still careful, like walking across a frozen pond, but at least we were both trying. She told me she'd left Greg's house for good, sold off what little was left, and moved into a small condo near the lake. Feels weird, she said once, having no one to clean up after. I smiled. That's not weird, Mom. That's freedom. One night, she asked me if I'd ever forgive him. I didn't answer right away. I thought about it for a long time. All the birthdays missed, the nights we'd gone hungry, the fake smiles he'd sold us when he came crawling back. I don't think forgiveness is about letting him off the hook, I said finally. It's about unhooking myself. She didn't say anything, but I heard her sniffle on the other end. Months passed. Life slid back into rhythm, though it wasn't the same melody anymore. I found myself craving simplicity. Morning walks, home-cooked meals, Saturday markets. I stopped wearing all black to work and started painting my nails bright colors. Something young me would have thought too girly. Now it just felt human. That's when the idea for a shield her started forming, a way to help women and seniors protect themselves from scams and digital traps like the one my father had tried to use on me. It began as weekend workshops, free classes at the library. By the end of the year, it had turned into a small nonprofit with a real staff, a website, and a waiting list. I didn't expect the joy it brought. Watching those women, retired teachers, single moms, even a few college girls, realize they could outsmart online crooks was like watching people reclaim power piece by piece. It healed something in me, too. One day after class, a girl about 20 came up to me. Nervous, hands fidgeting. "Ms. Walsh," she said, "I was scared to take this course. My dad, he stole from me, too." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something shift. "Then you're in the right place," I told her. "We don't let ghosts win here." She smiled through her tears. And just like that, I saw my younger self, scared, angry, but still standing. Dr. Valerie, my therapist, called our final session a closure check-in. She asked if I'd ever want to see my father again. I laughed softly. "No," I said. "I don't need an apology. I just needed to know I could live without one," she nodded. "That's growth, Emma. That's peace." When I left her office, the sun was dipping low over downtown Raleigh. The city shimmered like gold glass, imperfect, cracked, but still shining. I stood there for a while, feeling the breeze brush my hair, the hum of traffic below. I thought about all the years I'd spent chasing approval, chasing fairness, chasing closure. Turns out, none of those things are given. You take them back, one choice at a time. Later that evening, I stopped by the coffee shop near my office. A few of the women from Shield Her were sitting outside, laughing about something. They waved me over, but I just smiled and lifted my cup in a small salute before walking to my car. I wanted to hold on to that moment, the sound of laughter, the warmth of belonging, the quiet knowing that the story had finally settled. At home, I poured the last of my bourbon, turned on some old soft rock, and sat by the window. The night sky stretched wide and calm, no ghosts left to chase, I whispered, not to him, not to anyone, just to myself. Turns out protecting myself wasn't the victory. It was learning I didn't need to fight anymore. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough.